Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to another video. Today, we're looking at another video from Tasting History by Mr. Max Miller. And today is what it was like to visit a medieval tavern. And I see that dark rye in the background. Why is it a dark rye? Either way, I really enjoyed the what was it? The Turkish Delights video. So, we're going to check out medieval taverns because I've been watching a lot of isekais. And there's a lot of taverns in those, so...
While
check out some of the
tavern,
food.
A fantasy game might be where you'd go to receive a quest from a hooded stranger in the corner. In real life, it was where you went to gamble, drink, and eat. Perhaps something like this bowl of beef pottage known as Bukanada.
That doesn't look all that... I don't know. That didn't look all that good to me.
So if you ever find yourself in the late medieval period
Maybe the
and
recipe
you are
will
in
be
need of food
far
and
better.
drink, you better find yourself an inn, tavern, or alehouse. Now,
Alehouse.
all three of those are not exactly synonymous, and we'll talk about how they're different
Sounds
a
like-
little bit later.
sounds
But
like-
in general, you
Alehouse just sounds like a bar. Like an old-timey bar. Like pure bar. Like alcohol with maybe some snacks.
should be able to go to any of them and get a drink and probably some food. Now, depending on
Probably.
the quality of the establishment, you might just be getting some bread and cheese. But if it's a reputable tavern, you should be able to get a bowl of pottage or stew. Now, some of these places might have what today is called a hunter's pot or perpetual stew going. And this is the concept of
So it's just
always
keep
having
adding?
a cauldron of stew or pottage going at all times. Basically,
And just keep
you
adding
would
to it,
take
right?
a bowl from it and then replace the ingredients that you just took out, so it's always replenishing itself. Even today, there are places that still practice this. There's a place in Japan who has been serving the same broth since 1945. And in Perpignan, France, they served the same stew from the 15th century all the way up until World War II, when they couldn't get the right ingredients.
Oh,
and in the Middle
so it
Ages,
now
getting the right
stops there, huh?
ingredients would also influence what your
I feel like at some point it's going to stop being the same stew because you've completely replaced everything at some point. Oh god, it's that one thing again. What was it? It's like you take a building, you take it all down, and you replace all the pieces. It's a ship. You replace all the pieces in the ship. Is it still the same ship, or is it something new? It's that little conundrum. Except with food, stew. That sounds good though. I kind of would have liked to try some of those stews.
stew would be. You might just get a vegetable pottage, and some place it would just be beans and cabbages, but some places it might be like a fish stew or something with really quality meat in it. One of the
Oh,
most
I want the
common
meat.
stews from this period, which I've found recipes
like that.
for in pretty much every cooking manuscript from England and France from the Middle Ages, is called Bukanada or Bokenade. Take veal, kid, or hen and boil them in
Kid? What is kid? Is it like goat? Right? I mean, veal is young cow, right? And hen's a chicken, so I'm assuming kid is goat meat? Unless, some tavern owner got really tired of some brats running around. Could be.
fair water, or else in fresh broth, and smite them in pieces, and pick
Smite
them, clean,
them?
and then
Oh, well,
draw
that's
the
one
same
of the
broth
ways
through
to
a
say it.
strainer, and cast thereto parsley, sage, hyssop, mace,
Hyssop?
cloves, and let it boil till the flesh be enough. Then set it from the fire, and thicken it up with raw yolks of egg, and cast thereto powdered ginger, verjuice, saffron, and salt, and then serve it forth
Jeez.
for a good meat. I just find it so interesting that while the spellings have obviously changed, and they would have been pronounced quite differently back in the day, the words themselves, for the most part, are the same words that we would use today. Now, there are words like smite,
Smite.
which means to cut, but we don't usually use
Really?
it in like recipes. It's more
It really should. Bring that back. Smite your chicken. That sounds amazing. Shit, I'll be cooking more if the cookbook sounded like that.
of a biblical cutting, I guess. Though, maybe we should bring that back. In my next cookbook, I'm going to get rid of the word cut and use to smite. Now, there are a few
Does he really? Because if it does, I'll buy that book. Shit.
words in the original that we
Sounds
don't use
great.
at all in English today, like eieren, which was a Middle English word for eggs. Though eggs was also a Middle English word for eggs, and
Really?
it is around the time of this recipe that we see one get picked over the other. In 1490, William Caxton translated Virgil's Aeneid into English, and he was frustrated with how the English language was changing at the time. He tells a story of a mercer or a cloth merchant named Sheffield, and he was from the north of England, and he finds himself in Kent, in the south of England. And he goes up to this woman and asks her for some eggs, and she says, "I don't know what you're saying, I don't speak French." Well, neither did he, because eggs is not a French word.
No, it's not.
But she didn't know the word eggs because she was from the south, and she said Erin. Well, someone nearby overheard the confusion and said, "Ask for Erin," and he got his eggs.
Erin,
but after telling...
So instead of Erin, eggs is Erin. Erin. So it's eggs Jaeger.
This story, Caxton admits that he's also confused and finds consternation in these two different words meaning the same thing. And he writes, "Lo, what should a man in these days now write? Eggus or Erin? Certainly it is hard to please every man because of diversity and change of language." But
and I had to put them in parentheses.
He picked one, and he picked eggs. And usually it wouldn't matter which one he picked in years before because he would write it down and a few people would read it. Great. But he was using a printing press. So thousands and thousands of these were going out, and so eggs became the word to use. And he did that with a lot of different words. He was the one that chose which version we use even to this day.
Oh, really?
Anyway, I just thought that was interesting.
So it's a 50-50 chance we could have used eggs or Erin.
Bukanada, what you'll need is 3 to 4 pounds or about 1.5 kilograms of beef, goat, or chicken.
I was right, so it is goat. I mean, it's not surprising, but still, it could have been an actual child. I would have been okay with that too.
With the bones. I'm using beef. Originally it actually says veal, but I'm just using beef for this. Also, kid. In the recipe it says kid. That is goat. I'm always having people saying, "It's children." No, it's not. It's goats. A small handful of...
Don't knock it till you try it.
Parsley, a few leaves of sage, a few sprigs of fresh hyssop, a half
Never
teaspoon
heard
of
of hyssop.
mace, an 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, 4 egg yolks, a half teaspoon
One
of
of them
ginger,
broken.
a half cup or 120 milliliters of verjus. So what exactly is verjus or
Good
verjus?
question. Oh.
It was a medieval way of making juice from unripened grapes. And so it's not fermented or anything, but it does
unripened
have
grape
this like
juice.
vinegary kind of acidicness to it, but it's also sweet. So if you don't have it,
It is
maybe like
available online.
half grape juice and half red wine vinegar might mimic the flavor. Then a pinch of saffron threads ground up and a teaspoon of salt. So first, put your meat into a large pot and cover it with water or broth or a combination of the two, and then bring this to a boil and reduce to a simmer. And make sure to skim off any scum or foam that forms on top.
Yeah, that
Simmer
looks
this
nasty
for
as
about an
fuck.
hour or until the meat easily comes away from the bone. And then take it off the heat, take the meat out, and go ahead and smite your meat. Also, the knife that I'm using
That's such
is
a nice word.
this honkin'
Holy
knife.
shit.
It's
That's a
knife,
big boy.
which I'm now calling my smiting knife. This was made for me, handmade
Oh,
by
really?
one of my Patreon patrons, and it mimics
Damn.
an older design from like the early Renaissance, I believe. I just think it's
Does he
so
have a
cool. So I'll
store?
put a link
'Cause I would like to buy
Because he
some.
makes like hand-done knives. I'll put a link to his
Oh,
stuff.
sweet. I'm going to have to check that out on my
Anyway,
own.
This is now my smiting knife. So once your meat is smitten or smited, you want to
Smitten.
strain the broth as much as you can
That
until
has a
it's
different
nice
meaning
and
too.
clean. Then return the meat to the pot and add the broth back in. Add in the parsley, sage, and hyssop, all chopped very
Okay.
fine, as well as the mace and the cloves.
Sounding really
And
good
stir
so
everything
far.
together and bring it to a simmer. Then set the lid on the pot and let it simmer for an hour or an hour and a half or 2 hours, really, until the meat is as tender as you want it to get. Also keep an eye on it because you might need to add some water in case it all steams away, but that's why you want to leave the lid on as you do it. Anyway, while it cooks, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what else you might find in a medieval tavern.
Maybe a lot of fighting, I feel like.
Befell that in that season on a day in Southwark at the tabard as I lay, ready to wend in on my pilgrimage to Canterbury with full devout courage. That was from the prologue of the Canterbury
what?
Tales by Geoffrey Chaucer, and being written between 1387 and 1400, it contains one of the first references to a named inn, an actual historic inn.
Ooh.
It was called the Tabard, and this is where,
Tabard.
in the Canterbury Tales, all of the characters gather just before heading south to Canterbury on their pilgrimage.
It's like the beginning of a
Kind of the
D&D
whole point of the
campaign.
work. Chaucer talks about the owner of this inn and
Is that a
says
head?
that he was a very good host. And to the supper he set us straight away. He served us with victuals of the best kind. Strong was the wine, and well pleased we were to drink. Now, when I picture this in my mind's eye, I'm definitely influenced by things like Lord of the Rings and Dungeons and Dragons and all of these kind of medieval fantasy worlds, but
Yeah.
they aren't exactly like that. First of all, there are a lot fewer like orcs and elves, but also
I would assume so.
the inns and taverns and alehouses of medieval England, at least, were not all the same. They were quite different, at least at different parts in their history. Now, of course, throughout time, their definitions overlapped, and there was a lot of variety within each classification. But in general, you had the inns at the top of the echelon. They tended to be the nicest. And then there were the taverns and then the alehouses at the bottom. The inns, how they started out
right.
at least, they were a place for people to stay the night. Usually they were kind of near the gatehouse of a city or a town, or else in between cities or towns, like a day's walk away, maybe 20 miles away. So it was a place that you could stop the night and stay. And just like a bed and breakfast, they would often give you some food and drink. But only, just like a bed and breakfast, to the people who were actually staying there. You couldn't roll up, you weren't staying there, you roll up and you're like, I want some grub. That isn't how it happened. Though at times in history, inns found themselves making good money from the food and drink, and so they kind of said, all right, maybe we will just serve to anyone who comes up. And so it was like having a restaurant in a hotel.
I mean, if they're willing to pay, why not?
A tavern, on the other hand, was kind of the opposite. It was a place for people to come eat and drink, mainly
And then
drink,
leave.
but it was not typically a place to stay.
Okay, yeah.
Originally, taverns were places that served wine. They were run by vintners who made or imported wine. And remember, this is a time when wine was actually still being made in England. I think they do it again now, but they had quite a bit of wine being made in England, but it was mostly made by the church, and they kept it all for themselves.
The way he's looking, it's like he's not supposed to be drinking none of that, but he is. And it's just checking around him. Why has he got those keys on him?
Assuming communion. So
Some
anyone
interesting paintings,
else
though.
was having to get imported wine, which was a lot more expensive. The most common wine in England at the time was a red wine from Gascony that cost about 3 pennies a gallon, twice as much as the very best ale. Then there was Rhenish wine from the Rhine region, which cost 6 to 8 pennies a gallon. Now, if you're paying...
Man, I'm sure people wish those were the prices today. 6 to 8 pennies a gallon? Shit. People have garages full of fucking wine.
This much for your wine, you want to make sure that you're getting actually what you paid for. So if there's any question, you can ask the taverner to let you down into the cellar to see the actual barrel that your wine is coming from. If a taverner was found to be selling adulterated or counterfeit wine, they would often be punished by being put in the pillory or the stocks and having that offending wine poured over their head. Public humiliation.
Yeah,
but they would also usually get kicked out of the guild, which basically meant that they lost their business. There were actually people whose job it was to go around and inspect the wine, and it was more popular in France than in England, but these people were usually
Why does that
the
sound so
town
right?
crier, and they would do this kind of as part of their job and be called the wine crier. In the 11th century, there was a French writer who said, "Wine criers cry with open mouth the wine which is for sale in the taverns at 4 farthings." Now, some of these taverns were selling the best wine, and some were selling the worst wine, and everything in between. There was a lot of variety. In London alone, in 1309, there were 354 different taverns.
Damn!
So lots of variety.
That is quite a bit.
With a population of only 80,000 people, that's like one tavern for every 225 people. So business was booming. It's probably why they started eventually selling other drinks commonly, like cider from apples and perry from pears, especially in the West Country, and then mead, which is made from honey. Often that was more expensive and kind of kept for special occasions, but I'm sure you could find different versions all over. Also, I found a mead that I really like. It's called Odin's Skull. It's not so sweet and kind of has a little spice to it. I'll put a link in the description.
Well,
really,
thanks,
really
but
good.
I don't
If you
drink,
like
so.
mead, I should do another mead.
That is a
video,
cool last name, though.
there are a lot
Odin's
of old
Skull.
mead recipes I need to cover. More mead, maybe coming up. Anyway, these taverns, along with all these different drinks that they were now selling, would often start to sell food, and some would even have a room or two to let up, like on the second or third floor of the building. So you can see that the lines between the definitions
Started to
are
blur.
already getting blurred.
Yeah.
Also, these rooms, you didn't get like a room to yourself. They usually would house
Multiple
like 10
people,
or
huh?
12 different people who didn't
Damn.
know each other. It was like mash as many people into these rooms as
Hope the
possible.
room was
if
at least
there was a bed,
slightly big.
again, lots of people sleeping in the same bed, so it ain't the Holiday Inn. Now, the least extravagant of the three places to get drinks, and
Alehouse?
there were more places you could get drinks that we're covering, were the alehouses.
I feel like
And
that's just
when
a
they started
pure
out,
bar kind of
they
place.
were just that. It was a private house where the wife in the house was selling ale.
Oh.
Because she would make a big batch of ale, but ale back then, especially before hops, would only last a day, 2, maybe 3. And so
Really?
anything that the family couldn't drink themselves, she would sell to everyone else. And so she would stick a stick or a broom outside of the door, and that was the signal letting everyone know that there was ale for sale. Eventually,
That's
these
interesting.
places too would serve some food, though typically it wasn't the highest quality or
Yeah,
as
we would
varied a
assume
menu.
not if it's just at
You'd
somebody's
probably get
house.
some bread and cheese, maybe a meat pie, who knows. Now, just because
Leftovers
these
from last night's
alehouses
dinner.
were less official than taverns and inns, that doesn't mean that it was just a free-for-all. They were still controlled. They had to sell quality ale. In fact, in some ways, it was even more controlled because ale was such a staple of the people's diet. It was a major form of calories for many people. In
Really? What is it made out
1266,
of?
the essize of bread and ale went into effect, and this tied the price of ale and of bread to the price of wheat. And just like there were the wine criers, there were ale conners who would go around to test the ale and make sure everything was on the up and up. They were sworn to examine and assay the beer and ale, and to take care that they were good and wholesome, and sold at proper prices according to the assize, and also to present all defaults of brewers to the next court leet. A male baker or brewer who failed to adhere to these new laws ought to undergo the judgment of the pillory without any redemption of money.
Oh.
Likewise, the woman brewer shall be punished by the trumbrel, trebuchet, or castigatory if she offends
Trebuchet?
divers times and will not amend.
She gonna be
That is
flung
to
over the
say,
wall or
if
what?
an alewife flouts the law over and over and doesn't change her ways, then she's going to be punished. And the punishments are all forms of a public humiliation.
Okay.
So I had
Sounds
to
about right.
kind of look into trebuchet.
Yeah,
because
trebuchet.
I think of a trebuchet
Yeah.
and I'm like, were they flinging these poor women into like the walls of castles? So it turns out there are smaller versions of trebuchets that were used just for dunking people into the river, and that's what it
Ooh,
was.
okay.
They weren't trebucheting women across.
Didn't they use that for witch hunting too? It's like if she drowns, she was normal, but she floats, she's a witch or something like that. I don't remember. Something like that. Oh yeah, but no, Trebuchet, I was thinking the same thing as him, just flinging that bitch over the wall.
Anyway, if you are visiting an alehouse or a tavern or an inn, you'll want to take it easy. Don't go overboard on either the food or the drink, or else you might end up like poor Osbert of Elstow. The Bedfordshire
Vomiting
Coroner's
everywhere.
Roll of 1276 tells us what happened to poor Osbert after he left a tavern. About
boy.
midnight on 17th May, Osbert Lewile, son of William Christmas of Elstow, who was drunk and disgustingly overfed, came from Bedford toward his house. When he arrived at his house, he had the falling sickness, fell upon a stone on the right side of his head,
Oh.
breaking the whole of his head, and died by misadventure.
Falling
And while
sickness.
died by misadventure may sound
Okay.
cool, I assure you, it is not.
No, he just
And it
fell and hit
seems
his head,
that
it sounds
leaving
like.
these taverns drunkenly was an ongoing problem and often ended in
Death?
your demise.
No.
In another coroner's roll from 1272, it says that Ralph, son of Ralph, left a tavern and was accosted by 4 men.
Oh.
Robert Bernard of Wooton, Robert of Shefford, Richard Norman, and Roger Brienne. I love that every person in this story
name
has a
with a
first
R.
name that starts with the letter R. Even
Yeah, I
the
realized
tavern
that too.
Ralph was drinking at was owned by Robert Mallon. Anyway, these
Damn.
4 men, Robert, Richard, and Roger, ask Ralph if he is drunk, and he is. And so
Obviously.
he drunkenly says, "Who are you?" And in response, because he was drunk, Robert sprang forward and struck Ralph across the crown of his head with a spart axe.
Why?
So that blood and brains immediately flowed out. He immediately lost his speech and died thereof about midday on the morrow.
That sounds like an over fucking reaction from Robert over there. What?
The thing is, these ruffians who accosted Ralph are the exact type of people who would often be in the taverns themselves. I mean, there were those upscale establishments, of course, but most, it seems, at least that got written about, were dens of scum and villainy that were filled with gambling, drinking, and prostitution. But even with such a terrible reputation, it seems that pretty much everybody found themselves in a tavern at one point or another, even the
can't resist the drink.
But that was quite frowned upon, as can be seen in this letter from around the year 1200. An archdeacon to a rural dean, greetings. We have been given to understand that chaplains in your deanery live in less than upright fashion, for they go to taverns, as we have heard, where they have inappropriate and illicit association with lay people.
Is that prostitutes?
With the result that those who say priests are no different from lay people are justified. In order that in the future it cannot be said that, as a result of your laziness, such chaplains have been found in your deanery, bestir yourself to correct these matters. Another letter I found shows that whether you're a layperson or a clergyman, going and gambling at these taverns often led to ruin. In this letter, a man has lent the
gambling still leads to ruin in this day and age too, man.
Friend of a friend some money.
Of
and
course.
Now he is asking the friend to pay him that money back. And the friend is like, No, I do not wish to lend him anything of mine, for he is an inveterate dice player, and he loses everything that he gambles. Those who were with him in the tavern when he lost X and his pledges, they gained everything, right down to his drawers. So take care that you refrain from handing over any more of your own money, which you borrowed from me, and so lose on him what you ought to repay me. So should you find yourself in medieval England, maybe stay away from any taverns or inns that seem a little dodgy. I'm hoping that I have found
Which is going to be like 80% of them.
In the Porch House in Stow-on-the-Wold, which I just booked several nights at when I'm going to England in June. Very, very excited. Now, they actually claim to be the oldest inn in England, dating from the year 947. Though there are numerous places that make very similar claims, so it's hard to tell exactly what they mean. There's a wonderful video by one of my favorite creators, Jay Draper. I'll put her stuff in the description. She's great. And she talks about how a lot of places are England's oldest pub or England's oldest inn. And it often has to do with, like, there is one stone that was here in 1450 and the rest of the place is new. It's like, that's the pub of
It just sounds like bullshit then.
Sometimes also it's like, yes, in 900 there was definitely an inn here, and there's an inn here now, but
probably
here
not the
it was
same
like a
inn.
Dentist's office, and here was a bank, and Anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm still really, really excited to go. And perhaps if I can convince them to really lean into their medieval pedigree and make some Bokenade, like the one I'm about to eat.
I don't think
so
you
as
can
soon as
convince
the
them
meat
of that.
is nice and tender, take it off the heat, and then it is time to add the egg yolks. Now, if you just add the egg yolks right now, they're gonna scramble and it's gonna be unpleasant. So what you need to do is let the broth cool down just a little bit, and then take a little of that broth and slowly add it into the egg yolks as you're whisking, and they will start to warm up. Keep doing this until you've added about a half cup of the broth, and then whisk in the ginger and the saffron and the salt, and then you can add that to the stew. Finally, add in the verjuice, and it is ready to go. And here we are, a Bukanada fit for a medieval tavern. So you want to add those egg yolks in like last thing before you serve it, because if you ever have to reheat it, they do tend to scramble a little bit. So they go from thickening it to scrambled. The taste is going to be the same, but the look is a little different, and I did just have to reheat mine, unfortunately. Doesn't matter. Here we go. The thing is, smells wonderful. The saffron is what hits me. I was worried it was going to be the clove, because that's what was hitting me at the beginning, but now it's the saffron. Here we go.
Looks like you could use some potatoes, though. Nice and tender, I hope.
That's really good. That is so interesting because you get those medieval flavors that you would never find in a modern beef stew. Like the saffron, like the cloves, like the mace, like verjus.
What is mace?
Which adds this kind of biting acidity without being super acidic, because a lot of medieval dishes will actually just add vinegar, and that is the flavor that you get.
Just vinegar?
This is different. There's more of a sweetness to it.
Ooh, sweetness.
Really, really nice, and the meat just falls apart. Anyway, if you do want to make this, or if I can get that in England to make it, then I will point you toward the Tasting History website, tastinghistory.com, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.
I mean, sounds cool. Definitely not going to take the time to make that myself, though. So I'm probably never going to be able to taste that. Kind of looks like it also looks like it's begging for more. Like it's just beef at that point. I need a bit more. Maybe some potatoes and carrots. At that point, I just might as well make an actual stew then. But still, it looked kind of good. You see how to go good with bread. And what the fuck is that? How to eat like a medieval peasant? It looks like a hot dog, except the hot dog has been eaten once already by somebody. That's disturbing. But yeah, no, if you liked what you saw, go ahead and go to Tasting History with Max Miller. Link to his channel's down in the description, so go check him out. And if you want to watch what it's like to eat like a medieval peasant, because that looks disgusting and I don't want to look at it myself. But if you want to see it, go ahead, check it out. It's over there. And give him a sub if you want. So yeah, guys. Until next time, thank you for watching with me. And goodbye.